My name is Lara Klein. I'm a career coach in the Haas MBA Career Management Group, and welcome to Pivot for Passion. If you are thinking about making a career change either in the near term or at some point down the road, you are in the right place. We have 4 inspiring alumni who have done just that. They have made a change in their careers to something that is aligned with their values and their interests, and they're going to share with you their experience and also some advice if that's something that you think you might want to do at now or down the road. And I'm going to carve out a big chunk of time for questions from the audience because I want you to be able to ask the things that are on your mind. I'm going to kick it off with a few questions of my own, but start jotting down any questions that you have, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask them a little bit later on in the session. So for now, I'm going to just introduce the alums briefly by name, but then I'm going to let them tell with you or share with you their career journey and what they're doing now. So to my immediate left is Wendy Adams, graduated in '97 with her MBA. Rob Kaplan in '07, and Emilie Cortes, who is graduated in '02, and then Mitch Fong from '91. So also I just wanted to let you know that if you hear anything interesting or inspiring that you want to share with your friends or followers on social media, please feel free to do so and use the hashtag HaasAlumni. All right, so why don't we just start by having you each share with us briefly in a few minutes, what your career journey was, what your career was before you made the change, what was the impetus or the reason for your change, and then what you're doing now. And so we'll start with you, Wendy, and then go down the row.
Hi, everybody. So I started my pre-Haas career in investment banking in San Francisco. But it was specifically investment banking for healthcare companies and mostly biotech companies. And I decided I really loved the industry. However, I didn't want to spend my career in investment banking. So I used my Haas career to kind of transition from the service provider side to the industry side. And I found a great job after Haas. I was really excited about it. I worked there for about 3 years and I got really sick. And it was the kind of sickness where I didn't know what it was. It took me a long time to figure out what it was, but fast forward 10 doctors later, and it was diagnosed as late stage Lyme disease. Had affected my heart and my brain. I couldn't work all the time. I had to really cut back and really spend a lot of time just getting better. But it was an interesting process for me. And at the time that I started getting better, I started doing research on how had this happened. How had it been, so long? How had I tested negative on the test despite having late stage disease? As part of that process, I started talking to a lot of people in the patient community and reading science papers and kind of trying to understand what had happened. Through that process, I was introduced to some other people like myself in a town, 2 towns over from me who had had the same experience. And they had been, trying to understand why they had been misdiagnosed so long, including at Stanford, and kind of what was happening. Why wasn't anybody trying to solve the problem? They started a foundation out of this, and they asked me to join and be a part of it, and it's called the Bay Area Lyme Foundation. I thought, great. At this time, I'm feeling a lot better, though. And so I wanted to restart my career after, having to be a consultant and really not being able to work a lot. I wanted to go back into a career I really liked and loved the industry as well. And so I did that, and I did Bay Area Lyme Foundation kind of on the side. And I had a good perspective on it because I'd been a patient. But on the other hand, I knew the science side. I knew how to work with scientists. I knew the academic side and how universities worked. But 2 years into that, I realized, call it divine intervention or whatever, that I had it backwards. I really should be spending most of my time in Lyme disease and taking this experience I had in biotech, trying to take a story, reduce the story down to its core elements and communicating that story. And then my experience as a patient, really taking that and doing that for Lyme disease and spending most of my time on Lyme disease. So I did that about 3 years ago. I made the switch, and I'm the research grant director at the Bay Area Lyme Foundation, and we're the largest public foundation that funds Lyme disease research. And my job is to really run the grant process, from scientists sending in their grants, managing the milestones for those grants, making sure that scientists are doing what they say they're going to do and spending our money wisely. But the best part is I really evangelize about Lyme disease to stakeholders, to donors, but also to scientists who are at doing great research in other areas like cancer or other infectious disease, but really don't know about Lyme disease or think it's a really simple problem, and therefore they don't need to spend any money or time or research efforts there. And so I get to go tell them about Lyme disease, that there are a lot of patients suffering, and that really will invest in them to come over and bring their expertise into doing Lyme disease research.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I've had a number of pivots in my career. I started as a lobbyist in DC 20 years ago, and I thought I was going to be doing lobbying for computers and technology. That was what my interest area was in the industry. And I was doing that for a while, and then I sort of picked up a client where I was advocating for child safety seats, like car seats, proper installation of car seats, and suddenly I was lobbying on something that saved children's lives instead of the next hot technology, which is a little sort of, I'd say probably anathema to the Bay Area kind of conversation, focus on technology. But for me personally, I got this huge intrinsic value, and that sort of set me off on this path of always searching for how I can create more impact and chase that kind of feeling of intrinsic benefit like a drug. And that's what I spent most of my career doing. I was in nonprofit for a while, came to Haas to pivot, and transition to the corporate sector. And I spent about 10 years in corporations. In fact, the largest corporation in the country called Walmart out in Bentonville, Arkansas. Did that for about 10 years doing environmental work, so environmental sustainability. And what I found there was the large corporate politics and bureaucracy was kind of sucking my soul away. And I couldn't take it much longer. And so as I, started looking for, my own personal goals of making more impact, and at Walmart, which is the world's largest company, it's Fortune 1, you can always make impact there. But I realized that I couldn't do it in that way, so I decided to create my own firm. I co-founded an investment firm. I moved my family to New York, and we invest in environmental services, technology. We do early stage equity investing and other types of investing to create more recycling infrastructure around the country. Something that I leveraged my experience in supply chain and corporate supply chains for about 10 years and figured out a way to transition to that. So that was my latest pivot about 2 years ago, and so now I have this firm called Closed Loop Partners, and that's what we're up to, and look forward to telling you more about that story.
Cool. Can you hear me? I'm Emilie Cortes, O2, and I'm the general manager of Duma, Explorer, and Chaka camps, safari and trekking, and 2 camps in the Serengeti, all located in Tanzania, so the whole, out of Africa kind of experience. My whole career has been very focused on quantitative finance before that, and in fact, I graduated in 2002, the year when the Wall Street Journal wrote an article saying it was the worst year in 40 years to graduate with an MBA, and I was like, God damn it. So I don't really have much living family. I didn't have savings, and like many of my classmates, was kind of freaking out. And I remember August 1st was going to be the first month that I could not pay my rent. I had no more cash. I had no more credit. And very luckily, I ended up with 2 job offers, one Blue Shield, FP&A, financial planning and analysis, very plain vanilla corporate finance, and one at some crazy, weird securities broker that was trying to capitalize on the convergence between capital markets and insurance and credit risk. I didn't know what the heck this guy was talking about, but I was accurate in describing what my skills were, and he's like, you're a perfect fit. So, well, worst case, at least I'll learn something. I have to trust that he knows what he's looking for. So I ended up working on structuring a $6 billion esoteric collateralized debt obligation, and that was my 4 years in structured credit. So after that, I did, bounced around a little bit doing client relationship management, sales, and then ended up doing investment consulting for union pension plans. So had a few billion under management, and that was all really good and really interesting. I mean, I actually love finance, and I was really, really good at it. But the last 2 roles had kind of toxic cultures. And I felt like if I continued on this path, I wasn't sure if it was finance or just my own career choices, but I'm like, I think I'm going to have a heart attack before I turn 50. And I'm not down with that. Along the parallel track, I had gotten into mountaineering in a very big way, like carrying really heavy packs all around the world. Like it just totally opened up my horizons to just travel and empowerment, and especially as a small woman, like carrying 60 pounds with a bunch of dudes, and like very similar to the corporate world, like I had to be way more prepared. I had to train harder. I had to be smarter. I had to be a better team member, because God forbid, as the woman, I couldn't carry my own weight. But when you do that in a physical environment and in like actually dangerous environment, that's what really created my very intimate relationship with fear, and I would come back to the office with a lot more sense of personal power and ability, like really helped me find my voice, because in the mountains, if I didn't speak up, I could actually get myself killed. So when I came back to the office, I just like, it started really changing my relationship with fear, and that led me to end up acquiring a small all-women's adventure travel company. It was a turnaround situation. Long story short, after 4 years, I couldn't turn it around, ran out of the assets that I'd acquired up until that point, and basically had to sort of pivot again. Struggled a little bit trying to find a job, because unfortunately people think, oh, you were your own boss, you can't take direction anymore. And I was like, dude, I'll be a barista. I got bills to pay, yo. Like, I don't care. I'm a hard worker. Ignore my resume, you know. But in the end, it was actually somebody else's crisis. So I knew the people at Duma Explore when I was running the trips for Call of the Wild. I'd done Killy with them on my own. I came back and I brought the all-women's group. So I met everybody. I learned the culture. I learned some of the language. And because of what I call the management crisis, not to tell too much of the personal lives of the owners, it created the opportunity for me to go in and step in and help mediate and help kind of realign things in the business and bring a new professional touch, because they had only ever run this business for 17 years. So now I'm actually just 4 months into that and working on operations and marketing and rewriting the emergency response plan, and got our books online and cleaning them up. And so that's been really, really interesting to come in and kind of get to act like an owner without the financial risk. Has been really nice. So that's where I'm at right now.
And did you say where you traveled from to be here?
Tanzania, yes. So I came from Tanzania to be here. Yeah, there were other things too, but then that's where I came from.
This is a hard act to follow. I came from across the bay. Good morning. My name's Mitch. My story is I graduated in 91. Actually, it was also a pretty bad job market, or at least I would like to claim so. Yeah, because I only had one job offer. So when I got out of business school, I got one job offer, and I took it. I just wanted some experience, and I wanted to start making money. I mean, my family doesn't come from money. They came out of Chinatown. They sent me to these schools so that I could make a living. And so coming out of business school, it didn't matter what field it was. All I wanted to do is get some experience and get started. And so it landed in financial services. And financial services, it was they paid me well. I had some fun. It was a good job and everything. And I worked for the first company for 17 years, essentially, and really enjoyed it. And as the years kept going by, as time kept passing, because I only just took the job because it was the only job I was offered, my priorities began changing. And I think when I came out, 1991, fresh out of grad school, my priority was make a living, pay off my debts, make a living. And as I got older and as time started passing, I started finding myself asking, why am I doing this? And when I was in my early 20s, why am I doing this was easy. Just said it, make money. But as I got into my 30s and 40s, the answer began to get a little bit more complicated. And other priorities began to take surface. And I'll be honest with you, this wasn't like something like I sat there and got out of bed and said, you know what, I'm going to change, and I just went in that direction. I really struggle with this. I mean, I wish I could say I was that decisive, that self-confident, and that intelligent and everything else. No. I'm the type who worries about a whole lot of things. I probably worry about more things than I should worry about. And so for several years, I proceeded to try to leave. In other words, I kept quitting, quote, the industry, and then I would take a job offer from a friend who said, oh, I got a great one for you. And so after about 17 years of working at one company, I spent the last 6 going 2 years at one company, 2 years at another, and basically finding that I wasn't fulfilling anything that I thought I was missing from the last one. In other words, if my priorities were changing, I'm sitting there saying, why am I not feeling this like great energy to go to work? And maybe if I switch and do this, maybe if I switch to a different company, maybe if I went to a place where I could be in the home office or a home office that was, so I kept changing for those different reasons. Of course, none of them got to where I was getting to. And at the end of the day, the question of why I'm doing what I'm doing, I think, began to kind of fester more and more inside of me until finally about 4 years ago, I did leave the industry, and I kind of and I want to also add into this, good soul searching and discussions with my wife about what we're about to do and the risks of either side, right? There's a risk of staying in a job that you don't like, right? And that's everything from health to relationships, et cetera. And then there's, of course, the obvious financial risks of leaving this, this place which was paying me decently, paying me well, that type of thing, and very comfortable, and at this point, really quite easy, actually. So promised myself, that to give myself some time. 4 years ago, I left the industry for good, and I spent about 1 year doing nothing. It's trying to zero out the voices in my head, if that makes any sense. All the voices that, whether it be the phone ringing or just be my, the harsh voices in my head, for about a year, just to let the dust settle and try to really kind of get to know what I'm really saying I want and what I would like to do. And about 3 years ago, I had been doing volunteer work at the Marine Mammal Center over in Sausalito, and they found that some of the skills that I had been doing in my last career, basically speaking to strangers, talking, selling, promoting. If many people don't like doing that, I'm just going to tell you, animal people really don't like doing it, right? I mean, seriously, right? You've got a bunch of people, the reason why they're there is because I don't really want to deal with people, right? So the idea of actually asking to would you give me money is completely, totally averse to that. All these people are sitting in the corners just hoping things will happen right for them. So the fact that I didn't mind getting on the phone, thanking people for giving their gifts, I thought that was pretty handy. And so for the last 3 years, I've been an individual and planned giving officer at the Marine Mammal Center. And it's, I think one of the things that I had told Lara before is that I think for many years I struggled with the question of whether or not I could afford to do this. And when I look at all the things in my life which are important, and that's everything, like I mentioned, my relationship with my wife, my parents, my health, I don't think I could afford to ever go back.
All right, thank you. So it's great that all of you have found work that's really meaningful to you. And so I applaud you all for making that change. For people in the audience who are thinking that, I might want to make a change, what are some clues that you saw, looking back on it, that made you realize, yes, it is time to make a change? Any of you, is there anything, for those in the audience that if these things are happening, then pay attention to that, and it might be time for a change?
I definitely had that, because since I was doing all this mountaineering and kind of extreme sports on the side, it helped me really reset my perspective all the time and decompress. But once I actually tore my ACL, snowshoeing of all things, not ice climbing or anything, snowshoeing, and I had a terrible recovery. I just couldn't heal. Normally it's 6 to 8 months, and 14 months later I was still limping. So I couldn't even hike. And the thing about that it was a real catalyst for me, because without my outdoor activities, without being able to exercise, and I couldn't decompress, I had to face my work situation for what it was, and I found it unbearable then. And the fact that I did have to go so far and climb mountains around the world, I totally love it, but I needed to do that to come back and then get re-energized. There's also a weird thing at work where they felt most people need to relax and re-energize over the weekend because they've worked so hard. So we don't think you're working very hard because you're going ice climbing. It was really weird. I'm no, I was one of the top performers. This was my passion. And so I realized partly that the corporate world, and this isn't everywhere, but it was my experience at that time, wasn't really very understanding about people needing to be a whole person, a holistic experience in that. There's some understanding about if you have kids, then, oh, you gotta, leave early and take care of kids. But if you're a single person there and you want work-life balance, sort of like, oh, well, then you're not a serious professional. So that was part of where I was looking at the impact that it had on me that was positive, the impact that I had on other people when I was guiding or coaching or leading in the outdoors, both on men and on women, but especially on women when you achieve something that's physical and your confidence just goes through the roof and it really reshifts your perspective. So I said, wow, I actually think I need to take a harder look at this. I was petrified of the financial insecurity part because I didn't have family and didn't have savings and all that. I'm completely out on my own. And so I actually found this guy who's it's like a life coach, but he's called a warrior mind coach. He's out of Bend, Oregon, and he was so perfect for me because he had this woo-woo, let's do some meditation and guided imagery and NLP stuff, but he looks like a Navy SEAL, and he was also a mountaineer, so he wouldn't be just be comfortable washing the dishes and be in the moment, why do you need to climb Everest? Just be happy where you are. He totally got that ambition, but also all the internal work I needed to do around my own fear of making a big change and taking a risk and experimenting with my career.
Great. So are you recommending the Warrior Mind Coach? Is that something?
Well, I don't know if he's for everybody, but for me, he was absolutely perfect. And I still actually, I was in Bend and just talking with him about where I'm at and what my path is. It's been invaluable for me to have somebody that has been a resource like that, who is very impartial and also, to be frank, calls me on my own bullshit. Friends and family just can't do that. They're afraid for you, or they can't see where your blind spots are. So whatever kind of coach works for you, but he was just perfect for me because I needed the internal work, but I couldn't have somebody that was too mellow and zen. I needed somebody that understood my ambition and drive as well. So yeah, Greg Swanson, Bend, Oregon, Warrior Mind Coach.
Okay, I can't compete with the Warrior Mind Coach, but
none of us can compete with
yeah,
this.
Man. I'm wondering how this would look at Harvard Business School. I want this panel at Harvard Business School. Anyway,
we're definitely in California.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think one of the really interesting things for me was reflecting back on what I had been doing with my time when I wasn't feeling right. And even when I felt like crap and I couldn't, have conversations, and where I migrated to with my time and my energy was doing research on the subject. What the hell was going on? What had happened? And when I later was still working full-time in biotech, and I'd get home and I'd put the kids to bed, and then I'd go work on Lyme disease. And I had the energy to do that, and I wanted to do that. So for me, that was a really important clue that that's where my energy was drawn, and that's where I felt best, is where I could go dive into that, learn about it, and feel good. So that was a learning for me, is that's where I wanted to spend my time, and the little energy I had was researching that subject. So I think a lot of that happens in retrospect, where you go, oh, that was a huge clue. Why wasn't I paying attention? But in retrospect is fine. If you pay attention to it a little bit more, before the fact, then that's great. And please do that. I'm telling you to do that. But that's where I got my learning of, oh, this is where my mind wants me to be, is studying this issue.
So pay attention to those things that you are drawn to in your free time, and just notice what kinds of things you're researching or
what
reading,
you're curious about.
What you're curious about. Great.
I think for anybody who's in a job, who's been doing a job like I have been for a long time, I think to me, some of the signs are basically things that used to be easy aren't easy anymore. So if I'm doing the same type of job and you notice you're doing it over and over again, or the same, even with different companies or whatever, but you notice after about the 10th year, this is now like pulling teeth. And the interesting thing, I think, to your point down there, Wendy, is that I think the signs are always out there. For me, as that super planner type who's always trying to plan 10 years in advance, by the way, that's a waste of time. the signs are there. It's just I didn't have the time. I didn't spend the time to listen to it. So kind of quiet yourself out and try to listen to the signs. What are you really needing, and what are you saying? And be nice to yourself, because the voices can be harsh. But as soon as when you start seeing it, it's just so hard to do what used to be so easy. I think it's beginning to start asking the questions.
Thanks. So Rob, you did what a lot of people dream of doing, which is to leave the corporate world and start your own business. So please tell us, how did you do that?
Well, I guess I'd say there's sort of like, there was the awareness of that I needed to change. So we were talking about that. There's also like, how do you decide what that change needs to be? And that's really hard. I was very focused on what type of work makes me happy every day. I found myself in the corporate cycle spending 80% of my time managing 12 layers of decision making, right? Like that, even though I was doing other types of work, that's really how I spent most of my time. And I realized that was not part of what I wanted to do, but as I looked up in my current career path, it only got more complex from there. It didn't get less complex. And I spent a lot of time in my role trying to maneuver my job and my projects to have access to outside the organization. So I created projects that required me and got roles where it required me to engage other people outside the company that were doing exciting work and building relationships with them. So that as I was starting to think about over a period of several years, where did I want to go, I had created 3 different kind of pathways of networks in different sectors that I thought I could transition to. I did a lot of work in, I led all of the sustainability for the consumables business, meaning like all the healthcare and beauty, personal care work. And so there's a lot of sustainability work and formulation stuff and sustainable chemistry. So I built a whole network around that side. I also worked on packaging. So I built a whole network around there. And then each of those started developing new pathways for me to kind of create my own thing, see what those opportunities looked like and where the gaps were, and then make the leap.
Great, thanks. So as a career coach, I often encounter people who have a passion or something that they're interested in, but they're worried about, am I going to be able to pay the bills, support my family? So I'm wondering if any of you can speak to that about the practicalities of making a career change to something that's maybe more in line with your interests and values, but how do you still make enough money?
Yeah, I'm chomping at the bit for this one. Because financial insecurity was my biggest fear, and it happened. So I filed for bankruptcy with Call of the Wild in January 2016. And literally, I had just, the one thing I knew I could not do was to sell my own home for this company, and I had to sell my own home for the company. So I was like, I'm done. And so I literally have no assets now, and I'm 42. And as a financial person, that scares the bleepity bleep out of me.
Oh, don't hold that
the fucking shit out of me. But the thing is, so I feel like I can be very authentic and look at you all and be like, I'm living it right now. Okay, so we're all scared about not paying the bills, but some people, you really do have family. You have a partner. You may have some savings. You may have your retirement that you're willing to pull in. But that's part of what working with the coach did, was to set some limits so that I could satisfy. I'm super I know, yes, I'm blonde and short, but I'm phenomenally analytical. My whole finance career was super quantitative. So I had to satisfy the inner accountant and have these milestones that I could live with. And one of the things that happened was within the first 3 months, I actually bought Call the Wild with a partner. We were 50-50, and I discovered her embezzling, and I had to buy her out. And all of my cushion and a lot of my retirement went to that. And that was not in the financial projections, okay? So the worst fear came true. And it's been hard. It's been a real challenge, and I kind of get pissed off when people tell me I'm amazing and inspirational and fearless, because I'm like, no, I'm living it right now. But the thing is that I'm still alive, and I'm still looking at what are the opportunities out there, and I'm still open to experimenting. And I'm also open to, regular jobs and corporate life and stability and having, my adventures outside of work too. I don't think there's like any one path for me or anyone else, or that you have to judge yourself if you're like, oh, I just can't find something where I feel completely congruent because I'm passionate at work. Like, I think it's totally cool to do your job and then do your passion outside of that. Or there's even a little bit of, I've experienced this, like having your passion as your job makes your passion be work instead of only be your passion. But you can only learn that by going down that path yourself and figuring out what works for you. And just being super self-aware, and if something's not working, the thing is, everything can be reversed. Every course can be course corrected, right? So that's part of the like, yeah, you're scared, but work with your inner accountant, figure out what your thresholds are, and to some degree, it sort of sounds stupid to just go for it, but just go for it. Like, the only thing that, you're not going to die. The only thing that can happen is you learn from it, and you go, yeah, that didn't really work for me. All right, what's next?
And there's always Uber, right?
Your Uber.
That's right.
So you can, be creative. No.
Well, I mean, I ended up finding a job in Tanzania that's super interesting and rewarding, and I'm not sure that, literally, I don't love living in Tanzania. It's very different visiting than it is living there, and I really live like a local. So I don't know how long I'll be there, but for now I'm learning a ton about myself and what I like and what I don't like that will direct me on the next path.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to comment on this pull between passion or interests and making money and supporting yourself and your family?
I'll chime in. Again, I told you I'm the fearful type. I'm also the type of budget person, and it's one of my big things. For me, I would say, and I didn't have to go through all of that, which you've gone through, but for planning on it, if you have a partner, make sure you're on board with your partner, as this is something that it's a team thing here. There's nothing better than when I was going through this, and even today, to have my wife sit there and tell me, I'm so proud of what you're doing, that type of thing. And obviously that has nothing to do with the income that's coming in. Yeah, definitely not, right? The other one is, and this sounds really kind of like rudimentary for all of us here at a business school, but run a budget and live on it. So I think in the years beforehand, we lived off of a budget well below the income level of what what I was making, that type of thing. But we said, if this were to happen, this is what will probably occur. So we would be living off of this, and really can't kind of check in on each other every now and then. And how do you feel about it? And I think that actually, so by the time I actually did the switch, the financial impact was negligible. Everything else was huge going on, but the financial part of it was not a big jolt to us. And I think because finances are such a big thing for someone like myself, it was nice that big factor for me wasn't a jolt at a time when I was going through all these changes.
Great. All right, so now we'd like to hear what's on your mind, and so we're going to open it up for questions. The only thing that I ask is that you ask questions that might be relevant to a large portion of the audience. If there's something that's very unique to your particular situation, I would just ask that you save that and come up after and ask one of the panelists individually afterwards. So we're going to be using these catch boxes that my colleagues have in the back there, the blue and the gold, and they have a microphone, and you can just hold it right in front of your chest. So we want you to speak into the mic so that so everyone can hear, and also we are recording it, and we want the people who are not able to be here live to be able to watch it in person and be able to hear all the questions. So who would like to ask the first question? Oh, come on, I know you guys have something. Okay, great.
Hi, is this on?
Yeah, I think you can just hold it in front of your chest.
Okay, so hi, I'm talking to a box. I'm Eric Meyerson, class of 02. Hi, Emilie. My question for you is, after you decided to make the move, how did you structure your exploratory phase? how many of you spent time like trying to explore a lot of different paths versus say like heading in one direction and really concentrating on it?
Great question. Yeah, who would like to take that one?
Just because that was very conscientious for me when I hired the coach, and we set a time frame. We did explore a few different things, including like my passion is motivational speaking. I still want to do that. Like, I'm all about impact. I don't care if it's in investing, it's got to be impact. If it's guiding, I got to have impact on people. If it's speaking, I want to have impact. So we actually set a goal that like in 18 months I'd be out of the corporate world. Well, actually, he said a year, and I was like, there's no way in hell. That's way too fast. So we compromised on 18 months, and it was literally like a year and 2 days. But, you know, real intensive work, monthly calls, testing things out, seeing how it was going, seeing what my gut reaction was, meeting with my financial advisor, working through all the like, it was not just, I'm going to do this. So it was very, for me, it was very structured, a lot of guidance and a lot of milestones, and very well thought out. And that's, you know, even today where I'm at, thinking ahead, how do I feel about this opportunity? What do I like and I don't like? And I still am working with my coach about what do I see and what are the opportunities now? Like, I'll probably never stop doing this now.
For me, it was years. Like, it wasn't as, I'd say, diligent in a 18-month process. It was more testing things and having hypotheses about myself. And because a lot of this is like, what do you want to do and what makes you happy every day, right? And so learning that, and once I started to create that sort of criteria of what I was looking for to make me happy, and working on it with my wife, then it was just sort of keeping my eye open for where I thought that could be. And once I found that sort of opportunity present itself, it was a lot easier to jump on it because I had already done all of that work over a couple years.
I think for me it was structured, unstructured time. And so it was literally I needed to spend time not answering the phone. There's too much temptation to quickly go back into something sort of related to where I was coming from. It's an amazing exercise to just sit still, read a book, have the dog snoring next to you, and try to figure out, and I say this really kind of tongue in cheek, but try to find out what you really want to do. It's hard to think about on a clean slate, what did I want to do without relating to what I was just doing. Everything. In other words, a lot of things that came to mind was what was the next logical step, or what should I be doing, because I was a blank, and therefore I did. And to really sit still for a while and let my voices quiet down, that was it. And it sounds like it's very unstructured, but it was something I really needed for myself.
Let me just say one thing, and that is my path was more directed, but I had thought initially, given my background, about starting a biotech company around Lyme disease. But I thought, really hard to do, not a good body of research, blah, blah, blah. Lots of good reasons to do that. But that's where I thought, it never occurred to me to do a foundation, right? So keep your options open as far as the structure of what it is, as opposed to, where you want to be. So if I want to be in, children's advocacy, there are 3 or 4 different ways you could get involved in that. And just don't narrow your search too early. Think more high level about, okay, what is it I want to do, and let the structure, think broadly about structure. That's what I'd say.
So this is more maybe a comment and a question, but I did several pivots, and I left the corporate world to create an e-commerce company, which a few years later, 6-7 years later, didn't really pay. So I had to sell it and go back to the corporate world. And I felt it at first like a huge failure, because we grow up in Silicon Valley where you only hear about the successes of companies, of startups. You don't hear about the startups that have to, move to something else. And what I find was interesting, and the reason I'm sharing this, is that a lot of things I learned in my not successful startups actually enabled me to go back to a pretty nice corporate job later. So, lining in the cloud. But what I find is a little hard to do, and maybe it's just because I'm a vain person, but it's having gone through Berkeley and looking at the class profiles and everything, what's hard is to just let go of a comparison, to let go of, that girl who was with you at Berkeley and, she's VP of product management at Slack. I mean, she isn't, but, just let go of a comparison and not rate yourself according to what other people have done with their lives. And I don't know, I'm interested in your perspective on this because, we've come from competitive schools, competitive company, and it's sometimes hard, I find, to have that wisdom to not compare yourself. So I'm interested in.
I got a real quick one on that one. I've gone back to some of my old industry, junkets and stuff like that with some friends and stuff like that. When I was in the industry, everyone always asked, what do you do? Yeah. Now, 80 to 90% of the time, the conversation about why I do what I do. And it is so much fun to have that conversation.
I just don't care what other people think. No, really. Life is too short. Live your life for yourself. Full stop.
So, that is hard, and I think what I finally realized is that I have to define it for myself, and I'm lucky because I get to say, here are these things that I actually think now my for-profit career was leading up to my non-profit career, and I had a for-profit career just so I could do this job, right? And so that's how I frame it for myself, and I think that is helpful in communicating why, I run into people at conferences and they'll say, oh, I'd love to do that job, but I have to, they'll give me the 5 reasons they're not doing it, but they'll get to that point. They're just not at the same point that I was, where I found exactly what I should be doing. So I feel like for them, my job is then communicating that you can take your skills that you're learning there and do something that you're more passionate about.
Here you go.
You guys got to start throwing, don't you?
Yeah, that's the whole point with these. You can throw it. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Gurinder Singh. I'm actually part of class of 2016, just a year ago. So the question is, a lot of you guys have had pivots, whether from lobbying to Walmart to your own firm, and whether from corporate finance to volunteer stuff. Did you have moments of self-doubt where you said, shoot, I shouldn't have done that? Kind of regrets, small regrets, and how did you kind of get past that point?
Okay, good question. Any regrets?
Well, I certainly suffer from being a Northeastern Jew, and self-doubt is like a deeply ingrained skill. My mother has helped instill in me for many years. It is a mind over matter thing. I really resonate with the ego piece of it, right? Like it comes with maturity and failure and experience, and April was in my class, actually, right? So there was a lot of comparison today. And it's, huge amount of risk. I have 2 small kids, right? So it's just constant, and you kind of have to accept, for me, the way I get through it is accept it, feel it, and then move on from it. And recognize that, that's all in your own head and nobody else really cares. But it is really a mind over matter for me.
I think the biggest barriers were probably, like I said, I needed to quiet the voices in my head. My voices can sometimes be very cruel. That'll be everything from you're becoming nobody now. Every month it goes, you're less valuable, you'll have nothing interesting to say, that type of thing. To even in my 40s, would my parents approve? I mean, for all that they sacrificed to put me through school, to get out of Chinatown, to then send me to do what? You're gonna, go play with animals is what, but absolutely it happens. But I think always the biggest barriers were just my voices in my head, and that's why I needed to spend some time to quiet them down. And they did disappear. Be nice to yourself.
One other thought I had just on the startup, leaving to do your own thing, is having a business partner has been a huge way I've gotten through that. Some of those moments of self-doubt, because they probably happen at different times, right? But when I'm feeling self-doubt, I can talk to my business partner, and vice versa, and that has really helped me through those moments.
So one follow-up on I really don't care what other people think, but I do care what I think about myself. And I do have regrets, but then I have to work through them. And one of the things about acquiring Call the Wild, the women's adventure travel company, was I rationalized it. And when I was working with my coach and we were looking at all these things I wanted in my life, I wanted financial abundance, I wanted impact, I wanted flexibility, but I never said I want to be an entrepreneur. And I literally bought that company so that I would be a more holistic speaker brand. Because who would believe, a dirtbag climber saying, okay, Oracle's, sales conference, this is how you need to lead your teams, instead of walking the walk in terms of financial risk and still being in business. And so I literally bought a company to be a better brand. I had a partner, we had everything worked out, but then suddenly I'm running the company on my own, and it literally runs me into the ground. So yeah, I feel some regret, but at the same time, this put me on the path that I'm at. I did learn a ton. I am now running another company in Tanzania. I am now looking at like what is next? What do I need? What has this taught me? Which is actually like financial insecurity is extremely stressful for me. I'm very, very adventurous. I love challenge, but I can't handle drama. I actually need some stability. So how will I get that? So it's been just incredible in terms of like you learn like what you learned in your what you call failure, and I call mine failure sometimes, and people really give me a hard time about that. But my learning was incredible, and I do believe that will take me to a better place in the next few years. It's hard to have really profound self-discovery when you're called what I call the working zombies, right? You're just going along, you show up to work, do your thing, and then you have this little thing and you're going like, it's just, I need to be doing something more or different, or most of it really, I mean, where Berkeley comes down to impact. Like we want to have impact on people. We want to run, even if it's a traditional business, run it in a way that is kind and sustainable and empowering and has good culture and like has positive effects that reverberate. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, and that's why also like I say, don't kick yourself if you have the jobby job, right? Because you can still have impact every single day and be a leader, and you can still do things outside that or what your energy is drawn to. So just really take some time and be very self-aware of what you need and how to get it. It doesn't mean saying, kick your job to the can. That's not the only path.
I think also there's this concept of linearity in jobs, right? And you're going to, non-linear job progression is fine. It's just a matter of kind of getting a hold of the story and figuring out how to use that for your next job, right? So you're going to go, I mean, who knows? I might go back to corporate biotech. I don't think so, but you never know. So, and especially living around here, that's acceptable. It's harder probably in other places, but we're lucky in that we can, failure is not necessarily always a bad thing, and you just need to distill it to what you learned and why it happened, and then use that for your next job.
Great. So I think we have a question back there, and then we'll come to you next.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Yang, and I just finished the MBA and PH program this past December and went through a job search process myself, so this is very helpful. Thank you. My question is around, as a part of your job search, did you do things on the side that kind of test those hypotheses, like Rob said? And if you did, how did you balance your time between your day job and your outside work, as well as other types of networking that you might have done?
Work-life balance is really hard. I mean, a job search and this type of like almost meditation is a full-time activity in many ways. For me, what I tried to do as much as possible is like leverage my day job to test those hypotheses, because it's not so much, you need to go work for a nonprofit somewhere, but for me, it's like, what type of activity do I like doing every day? And then I can start to apply it to some kind of social cause or impact area if that's what is valuable to me. But like, do I like sales? Do I like pitching people? Do I like working in spreadsheets? Like, what will make me happy every day? And using my day job to test those ideas.
I had a different situation because I was a chartered financial analyst and chartered alternative investment analyst, so the ethics are extremely strict. So I did experiment a lot outside of work with speaking, with guiding, leading trips, and I did it all for free because I did not want to have to disclose to my employer that I had outside compensation and have to and talk about why that was. But because it was so aligned with what I love to do, experimenting wasn't hard. Like go talking to some group about what I learned from mountaineering that I bring back to help me be a more effective professional is rewarding to me. So I did do that, and that was part of all my plan, was to make sure that I focused on doing it and I got it done. And yes, it was very, very busy, but I loved it. So that's also like, where does your energy is drawn? Like if it feels really hard and tiring, then listen to that. Listen to your gut.
Great. So we have a question up here. You want to throw it to him? Yay!
Hi, Rye, class of '94. We rarely pivot when we're at the top. We pivot when we hit a bottom, when the pain gets to be too much. I went through a transition from finance to tech, and I know that waking up on a Monday morning and going, if I process another transaction, I'm going to be sick, was mine. And so I know we kind of touched on this before in a slightly more abstract general way, but I'd like to hear maybe if you can remember or take yourself back to kind of a particular moment where you made the decision, and maybe for the benefit of the people here, of what were the how you felt, and you know what led up to that, you know.
Thank you. Great question.
I think for me it was, I forget, I think Mitch said it, I was doing the same things and they weren't going anywhere. And I was tired of doing the same things over and over and not having them, you know, you just get to a point where you're like, I've seen this story and how it plays out. And I am like, and it was for me, it was hard to leave the company I worked for. I loved the team, best team. It was like being amongst my high school friends. Like that was the hardest part. It wasn't leaving the work, it was leaving the people. And so I had to have a real kind of come to Jesus moment of myself and saying, yes, you love the people, but you don't love the work. And that has got to be part of that's part of the overall basket that you're looking to fill. So that was for me where it was, okay, I know what this work is doing. I know how to do it, but I know what I'll feel like at the end. And it wasn't as good as I would feel at my worst day in my, you know, in my nonprofit job is better usually than most of my days at my for-profit job. And that was the equation for me.
I don't remember a specific moment because it was a culmination, but there was a conversation I had with my wife where we were like, I'm not a lifer for this. Like, I don't see, at Walmart, people are walking around with badges on that have 25 years on them, right? That's how long they've worked for the company. And, you know, that's sort of directly correlated with their net worth, right? Because of how long they've held stock. But you know, once I came to that conclusion that I'm not a lifer, then it was like, well, what am I waiting for?
I think for me, everything was actually going very well with my career. And I think the moment was when they asked me to relocate, and I declined. So I think for me, and I'm only thinking about this now when you're asking this question, I think at the moment where I wasn't willing to do everything I possibly could to keep moving forward, then I think automatically I'm beginning to move backwards. And I think that's what began the thought process as, then this really isn't, I don't have my heart in this, obviously. And I think that began a multi-year process for me.
All right, so over here. And then we'll come to you next.
My name's Jill, and I'm actually Rob's wife, and I was going to help him answer this question by saying that at Walmart he was doing really well, and he was in a really good place, and I think that he had gotten his project that he's working on now, that he's transitioned to do full-time, to a place where he felt like he could do more if he jumped ship, and so he had spent all this time building those relationships and building up to this moment, and was doing well and being recognized for the work that he did, and felt like if he took it to another level by leaving the company, he could leave when he was still at the top and translate his success better from outside. So, for what that's worth.
Thank you.
All right, and I think we have a question over here. Want to catch it?
Hi, I'm Mo, and I just wanted to make a comment. For some reason, I hear about certain events that are kind of more touchy-feely, and like this voice in my head is kind of skeptical. And this, like every other time at Haas, is like, put those worries to rest. You guys have been amazingly authentic, and it's like, yeah, this is exactly like how you would imagine a talk like this going, how you would want it to go. There's no like platitudes, no artificiality, so I really appreciate that. My question is about relationships. Rob, Mitch, you've talked about you know, discussions with your partner. You've talked about the warrior mind coach, but over I don't mean that. I just had to stop and breathe. I wrote his name down. But I'm curious on a journey level. Like, I'm sure that there's been key relationships, key interactions, a key social component to all of your journeys, and I'd like to hear more about that. I mean, was this intentional? I mean, in the case of the coach was intentional, but maybe how did you meet him, or, you know, and how much of these like were just random interactions that just kind of helped you along, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't even really know I was looking. I saw a Facebook post or something about, I was in search and rescue, and I look like a hardcore mountaineer, but was thinking about those kinds of things. And he had some post about how SWAT teams do visualization and become more effective. And I was like, ooh, that's really interesting, because it was this like combination of sort of the aggressive world and the woo-woo side. So it just totally piqued my interest. I looked at it, and then I don't know what inspired me to do like the 30-minute consultation, and we started talking about what I did on the side, what I really was passionate about, and the frustrations at work. And basically that turned into, an hour conversation, and then I was like, all right, I think I really am. I didn't believe I was ready for a change. I thought, I need to get back in shape, I need to heal, I need to save more money, And he was like, just take a chance and let's do this. So he has this Vision Quest weekend thing, and then you build out like a lot of really pretty intense stuff about breaking down everything, what you were saying about linear, what's the next step, doesn't matter what your education is, like what makes your heart sing, and then how do you turn that into a plan to explore if you're not already on that path, or to go for it. But I actually wanted to talk more about, I had a boyfriend at the time I now refer to as the platonic relationship, 6 years. And basically he was my rock and like my house husband, and because he didn't really love me that much, he didn't need me, so I could go away for a few months and not have somebody suffering as a result. No, but I'm serious, like I'm so grateful for that relationship. But then I turned 40 and I had the moment of like, oh my God, I'm never gonna find somebody I want real love, and so I broke up with him. And now we're totally still best friends. We'll always take care of each other. Like if we both don't have partners and the other one gets cancer, like we'll be those people. So that was an important, he couldn't contribute financially, he was a mountain bike mechanic, but he contributed in so many other ways of like helping be this rock of stability, while everything else was really crazy with Colorado. I was traveling all over the world and, had all this pretty intense stress that I think if we were actually like really in love, it would have torn the relationship apart. And so now I'm on a path of, finding what I need professionally and becoming a little bit more of a complete and stable person to be available to be a good partner to somebody else. So that's like it really can affect your relationship and who you bring in your life and what you need. So that's, as human beings, something you have to consider too.
I will just say that the hard part for me is you never know which of those relationships is going to turn out, right? So for me, it was starting to do my research and talking to people about what this problem was. Those are the core, even though I met them like 12, 15 years ago, those are the core relationships I still have. Because you pick out the people who would be your friends or the people you'd want to spend time with even if you didn't have this disease. That's who it was for me. And I still keep in contact with them. But some of them turned out to be pivotal in introducing me to people who were doing what I wanted to do and just needed me to come help them do it, right? So I think it's expanding your network just to learn. And then it's cherry picking the relationships out of that where you say, okay, this person is doing something interesting or has great experience, or I just like them and I like what they're about and I want to hang out with them. And then, nurturing those relationships to see where they develop.
I think for me, in terms of like the core relationships to myself, it was important for me to have my wife want me to do this. It was important for me to have my parents' acceptance and understanding what I was doing. I'm not sure they actually had the objection. It was just really for me in my head. But I think in terms of getting to the other end of the journey, go volunteer. I've been volunteering at the Marine Mammal Center for 10 years, and I networked and talked to a lot of different people about different things I was thinking about. Like I love cars, so I talked to somebody at Audi. I talked to whatever it is, and yes, I started getting to know it. And suddenly I found out at the Marine Mammal Center, I mean, like if you talk to a bunch of financial service executives, you're crazy. I can't believe you're doing what you're doing, right? So that's not exactly helping me out. But all of a sudden you talk to somebody at the Marine Mammal Center and you find out that they had a career in financial services or they had a degree in rocket science and stuff. And And you start hearing these other things that you can kind of relate to. And in terms of getting out there and networking, and I think Haas offers this wonderful opportunity, it was really quite inspiring for me, and it helped me move towards that, as opposed to, and in addition to the support and the foundation, that really helped me drive me to a different place.
Great. Other questions? Okay. So for people in the audience who perhaps there's a little voice inside them that's saying, there's something else for you to be doing. You're not meant to just stay on this same path that you're on right now. What is like one concrete step that they can take when they leave today to get them started on exploring what this next chapter might be? Like a concrete action step.
I would say, maybe it's something that's figuring out what articles you want to read, right? Where do you kind of get curious about something in the newspaper, something in San Francisco Magazine, something? Where are you kind of drawn to learn in your limited time that you have available to do that? So and that is for me the most important thing that I learned through this process was, okay, I have this little amount of energy and I wanted to spend it here.
Something I often recommend to folks who are thinking about this is, the challenge with it is that the grass is always greener, right? And you don't really know what you're just like, I know I don't like this, but that's what it really is. So I recommend create a list of 5 perfect ideal jobs that you think are your perfect ideal jobs or companies, and then find 5 people that represent those and then stalk those people. Right, so like create a Google News alert on their name and like try and network to them and send them emails like I saw you just did this, and just get to know them.
I have too many men that do that to me already.
Not what this is about.
And then you'll start to know, like, do I like that person, right? Or do I like what they're doing every day, and is that something I would like to do?
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Clearly.
Obviously the coach thing, but the biggest thing I would say is like really get in touch with your fear. Because it's so easy to look at people that are doing interesting things or have big career changes or whatever and say they're fearless. And it's the biggest cop-out to say that person's fearless, I have fear, thus I can't do it. So that's probably one of the biggest things I've done is to really, and the mountaineering helped me so much. Like, what is real fear? Will doing this actually kill me? Like, oh, my spidey senses are going off that this slope could avalanche. All right, I'm going to actually listen to that fear and turn around. Oh, I'm afraid I'm not going to do well at this presentation. Okay, I'm going to get in touch with that fear. Where is it coming from? Self-worth, blah, blah, blah. How can I deal with it? Okay, I'm going to go for it. So that's probably the biggest thing that you're holding yourself back. It's your own fears. And where is that coming from? Is it your own self-worth? Is it, some trauma in the past? Is it concern about what your parents are going to think about you? And really tap into that and understand it. And I think that will unlock a lot about what you could be doing if you can work through that fear.
I think the one tangible step I would say it's not different than here is just pick up the phone and start talking to somebody. I mean, there's only so much, like I said, keeping the thoughts in my head at one point really wasn't doing any good at all. But you start talking to other people, whatever it is, start connecting, networking, and talk to somebody who's in the industry that you think you might want. Not to answer the question, but just on another side of it, I say, also count everything as a win. I mean, I think we go to business school and we're so competitive, we're so used to winning more than losing, that type of stuff. Winning is not finding the ultimate job. If you think that that's a win and everything else is a loss, that's a really hard standard. A win is to sit here and to take a step. A win is to pick up the phone and talk to somebody else. A win is to network or to take one thought and spend a little bit of time in another industry or something like that. And that's a win, and celebrate that. Because otherwise you really set yourself up for a hard road if the only thing that is a win is that you're going to find the ultimate job that gives you the ultimate fulfillment, that gives you all full financial security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, one step's a win.
I've relocated my family 3 or 4 times for the perfect job. And then after 2 years, it's no longer the perfect job. So there's no such thing, right? Like, it's a journey.
Okay, let's take 1 or 2 more questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap up. Who has a question? Okay, I see one back there.
I wanted to see you throw it all the way.
I'm John, I'm class of 97, so this is my 20th reunion. Hey, and I'm curious if, I was thinking about this coming over, like this is 20 years into the career, kind of midpoint a little bit, and I'm wondering like how what your perspective would be if this was, 40, 50th reunion and you guys were sitting up here, like what would be the most important thing for you, like looking back, like what would you think you would talk about at that point, just to get that perspective?
Good question.
So I had to deal with this because I had some stuff going on in my foundation that I wasn't happy with. So I would say that I would look back and say I was so damn lucky, right, to be able to spend my time and my energy and my education and my passion working on something that really needed people to work on it. And I got to marry my, I call it marrying my avocation with my vocation, because it was really taking aspects from my personal life and marrying them with my professional career development that had kind of led me to this point. So I think, and sometimes it's hard to look at, and my last job before my new job was kind of like, okay, it's going okay, but it wasn't the perfect fit for me. So I really had to, give up the version of myself that I thought I wanted, which was, I'm going to be a CEO of a company by the time I'm whatever age, but I really want to do that. And I think being able to look back at my career and go, okay, it's okay. That version was an okay thing to want. I don't want it anymore. And to be able to redefine where my life is at, 48, 49, as opposed to waiting until I was 65, then I was really super lucky to get to do that when I could spend more time. I could spend a significant chunk of my working life working toward those goals.
So there's a concept in the outdoor industry called leave no trace, like traveling with minimal impact, but I actually believe in leaving positive trace. And so if I'm looking back 40 or 50 years back, I just want to see that everything I did and every person I touched, I left a positive trace. And that's pretty much it.
I think I look back and say I'm really glad I started as early as I did start the conversation. My own view of my life is I think I spent most of my life not ever really asking myself, what do I want to do? Right? Everything was the next logical step, right? Because I was good in math, I got a major in math, and I was in business school, so I wanted to get there. Every promotion was based upon the last promotion, right? But there's never really clearing the board completely and saying, what do you really like, or what do you want to do? And to start that conversation, and it can change. It can change from year to year, it can change from decade to decade, but to start asking the question, I think is a really healthy thing to ask. You don't have to come up with an answer either, but I think it's a really good exercise. And I think to start it as early as you can, and you mentioned that kind of mid-life part of it, I think it's natural that it happens around there. I think it's too cheesy to call it something like a midlife crisis, but I think there's a natural midlife that starts happening. I've been doing it for 20 years. Could I do this for another 20? Right? That type of thing. So yeah, keep asking the question.
Oh, okay, so final last words of wisdom, lightning round from each of you. Final piece of advice.
You think I have more? I don't know, man. It's all. The only thing I can think of is I did a talk like 9 years ago, and somebody came up to me and said, I remember this like every day at work. When I have a challenging situation, I was talking about being on the mountain, and I, of course, tried to climb a 14er with a heavy pack, and I had a pin holding my shoulder together, and maybe it wasn't the best idea. And I did a move, and the pin blew through, and I'm at like 13,800 feet, and now we're like stuck, and we had to sleep out. This whole epic thing. And I was talking about how great that partner was, and how I found this like super crazy, like ice cool calm in the middle of like, this could really go the wrong way. And it was part of like figuring that out about myself, figuring that out about my partner, my climbing partner, and just realizing that, freaking out doesn't do anyone any good. So no matter what it is, like how many times have you been in the car with your partner and you're lost and you're late and you freak out, but like nobody's gonna die, right? So like no matter what the situation is, even the more serious it is, if you can just calm down, chill out a little bit, and try to look at it objective, and that like adrenaline freaking out, it just doesn't do anybody any good. So in life, and as you're making these decisions and as things are going wrong, that's, it worked for somebody else. They remembered that.
Great. So
I touched on it before. I think really being nice to yourself is a big part of it. All the things that even the questions that came up here were about, finances, or whether it be, failures or whatever. Be nice to yourself. Let's be honest. There's no one in here who's not employable. I mean, if worse comes to worse, seriously, my wife and I have had this conversation. We're willing to, if we made this pivot, and my wife's going through this right now, and we guessed wrong, we estimated it wrong, whatever, we're both willing to give each other a hug, say we took that chance and we're going to go flip burgers. It's not the end of the world. And, to the extent that we took the shot at it, and we do it together, as long as we're, together and we're supportive, but being nice to yourself is huge. It was for me, and it's really hard for me to quiet those really harsh voices. So there's nothing wrong with going out and trying to seek to go have some play. It's worthwhile.
All right. Wendy.
I'd just say pay attention to getting quiet, feeling how you feel when you're doing your job, and when you're doing things outside your job, and what interests you and where does your energy kind of migrate towards. I would also say that, as part of this process, it was really good for me to take the skills that I had in biotech and reduce them to or actually bring them up to a higher level and say, okay, I deal with pharmaceutical companies, I deal with VCs all the time. But that's not necessarily the skill. The skill is taking a story, a very complicated story, and reducing it and making it easier for people to understand, and then creating a story around that and selling that or communicating that to other people. And that's the thing that makes me, I would say, what's probably the thing that makes me really good at my job now, is because I can take something really scientifically, conceptually hard to understand and reduce it to its core and then talk to people about it. So, and that was what I could kind of sell the foundation on. And that's what they used me for, because and so I think if you take a look at your own careers and say, what am I really good at? What is the skill, not necessarily the skill in the environment I'm doing, but just the skill, and if I like doing that, then where are other places I could do that to some benefit.
Great. And Rob, final piece of advice.
It's so easy to think about these types of decisions as like the end of the world, right? Like if I make the wrong decision now, the rest of my life is going to be going down this path. And I think, to the sort of retrospect question, like if you look back over your career, today, every decision you made, whether it was going to Haas or not, created who you are today, right? So it's not that there was a wrong decision or a right decision anyway. Along that path, it makes you who you are.
One very short other thing. So during this whole process, I left finance, but I've still been the treasurer of the Compton Foundation. So I actually don't have a break in my finance career. So it is possible to do it in a way that you're not like, oh my God, this is going to be the end. I can never go back. So that's just something else to think about. In the way that you're testing out new ideas, you can have your new idea and stay connected to your old world, and that might make you feel more comfortable.
Great. Well, thank you. So we have some gifts for our alumni, so let's thank them for coming.